Yeah, but we don't need it, right?
So yeah, it comes up with ordinance to bring before us, and then we can have a discussion.
I'm me. I mean, I think that makes sense.
Do you want a motion to amend that to board operations? Well, she said something about checking with this.
Now it's enforced.
Sorry, but you should get my email address.
We're going to move this to board operations. To follow item number 6. And then if Ron will read that. Because last time I had it.
I just want to give it to you before I forget.
Okay.
Last time I had, I think. Yeah, I think last time I had 2 minutes.
Actually, it's not the Elliots. It's no relation to either.
Yeah, I was gonna say I saw that in the pictures up there. And so walking up the stairs, like
Same
got like another store or something.
I thought that was cool that he's in there doing it.
I'm actually related to the Dalton gang. Don't spread that out too much. How are you?
Good.
Don just handed me this. We're doing this tonight. You would be the one to read this.
Okay.
Another time, Lori read one and Cooper read one. So, that could be your turn.
Sure. The whole thing? What's up?
I verified that. The whole thing?
All right.
Ron, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Well, living the dream.
Should have brought my glasses.
Yes. Down, I'll still say it.
Last but not least.
Third's the charm.
I don't know.
There's no parking on there.
I know, it's pretty tight.
I parked in a no parking place.
Clark, good to see you.
Do you know, Will I get a ticket when I have something, please?
You never know.
Why don't you tell one of the officers, don't ticket you?
So I'm supposed to work there, but I never went there.
Are you telling them to do something? No, there's literally no. You say, please do me a favor. You say, please do me a favor. Give me a ticket. There was no parking. Where'd you I know.
On the other side, you know, when you go around, there's all these parking slots, but then there's a sign that says no parking.
Two of them says no parking. I parked around the side of the building, but I'm facing Sam's office.
Yeah, if you're
At the
facing,
end. At the very end. Facing Lincoln City.
yeah, the field is where they have the sign.
You ought to be. I can't imagine.
No. Ronnie, you ready?
Seriously, I parked in no parking space to get in there. No other parking.
I appreciate it. Thank
No
you.
other parking.
Let the chief. He's sitting.
We could at least tell you the rules to see if that sign really means something, because everybody's
Time to
parking.
run back there.
Yeah, see her.
See pictures of that car. I heard it was a car accident.
That's what it looked like from the pictures
I
of
think they missed the curb.
because they were
And was that thing?
there was him and he took the
Guardrail. Yeah.
so I saw that. Talk about a train.
That's why I can turn it
We'll have an early morning tomorrow.
She told him her story. She said, let me give that some thought.
Did he really say that?
I think he was joking. He was laughing.
He said it would be okay.
So you're good? Ronnie, you I call to order this regular meeting of the Monument Board of Trustees, Monday, August 6, 2018. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Hogan, will you take roll, please?
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Bornstein advised me that he may be a little bit late to this meeting.
Okay.
Trustee Clark?
Here.
Trustee Koopman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Here.
Trustee Stevens?
Here?
Before us, we have a consent agenda in our agenda. Is there any modifications or a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to move the financial reports to past number 6, just for convenience sake for the guests that we have in the audience.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion.
I'd like to make one more motion to add the discussion item on the safety, media, and access. I think we added at last meeting. I think it'd probably be best to throw into the board authorization items. We can have a little discussion on it and then hopefully give some direction on what we'd like to see.
We have a motion.
I'm a little confused on what that Trustee Koopman's motion is. Is it to remove the discussion
I would
item?
like to move discussion item, safety of media and access to board authorization items.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other motions or, excuse me, any other amendments?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hogan, will you take roll?
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Bornstein? Not any is up. Trustee Koopman?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0. So first item on our agenda will be recognition Presentation of the Masonic Lodge Officer of the Year Award. Chief Shirk.
Okay, if I could have Officer Romano come up in the Masonic Lodge. It's a very special occasion when we get to choose an Officer of the Year award, and this year it's Officer Romano. And I'd like the Masonic Lodge to read what they have and present the information.
Thank you very much, Chief. Hello, my name is Jim Berger, and I'm representing the Centurion Lodge 195 here tonight. And it's a true pleasure to present this award to Officer Andrew Romano, who is a 6-year veteran of the Monument Police Department. In January 2018, Officer Romano tested for and was placed in the position of Community Resource Officer for the Monument Police Department. As the Community Resource Officer, he is responsible for maintaining relationships with area schools and businesses, as well as citizen groups. Since taking over the assignment, Officer Romano has shown a great dedication to the position, the police department, and the community he has chosen to serve. He's attended countless business meetings, provided much needed safety training to area businesses, worked with neighborhood watch groups, fostered relationships with school personnel, and interacted with area children and scouting groups. Officer Romano has done all this while keeping a positive attitude, always putting the needs of the department and the community before his own. Officer Romano's actions reflect well, not only on himself, but the entire law enforcement profession. So we have for you, Officer Romano, a plaque, which you can put on a wall, and more importantly, a check for $200 in appreciation of your efforts.
Thank you, sir.
Next item we have on the agenda is Oath of Office. Chief Shirk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I have Josh Barker, Jarrett Busa, and Mike Keel please come forward? Before we do the official swearing in, I just want to make a couple of comments about each one and every one of you. Josh, our tallest gentleman there, spent from 2009 to 2015 with the, I like saying this word, the Pascagoula Police Department in Mississippi. After that, he spent a few years with the Mississippi Department of Corrections for parolees. And so he's got a little over 9 years of experience. During that time in Mississippi, he had the opportunity to deal with alligators and hurricanes. He's got one child, a 13-year-old daughter, who's not here tonight, and his wife, Ashley, when we come to present the badges, if you would invite her to please come pin the badge on. Thank you. Officer Jarrett Busa was a Marine from 2003 to 2007. Mr. Mayor, hurrah. No, that's not the right term for it. I was in the Coast Guard, so. From 2011 through 2017, he was with the Clearwater, Florida Police Department, a little over 5 years with them. Then he went to El Paso County Sheriff's Office and worked court security. His wife, Chelsea, I'm sorry, they've been married for about 1.5 years, and he found it very unusual working in this community because where he came from, I asked him about alligators and snakes, and he said no. But up here I said, you have bears and mountain lions, and he goes, I know, I've never dealt with that. So it's a little bit of a new business for him. Reserve Officer Mike Keel. It's been a long time since we've had a reserve officer with us. A reserve officer is one that is non-paid, but they are post-certified as a reserve officer, which means he can work the street as long as another officer is available. Mike is also a battalion chief with the Tri-Lakes Fire Protection District. He's also a paramedic. He's one of our trainers in combat medicine. He's taught all the officers how to deal with serious medical issues. He's also the armorer for the police department, so any malfunctions that we have or any inspections we give to him to fix. Unfortunately, we get a fireman that can outshoot most of the officers. And his wife Andrea is here, along with his sons Matthew and David. So with that, if I could have each one of you raise your right hand and say after me. I, your name,
Michael Keel,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution
that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution
and government of the United States of America,
and government of the United States of America,
and the Constitution and government of the State of Colorado,
and the Constitution and government of the State of Colorado,
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
whether domestic or foreign,
whether domestic or foreign,
and that I will bear true faith,
and that I will bear true faith,
allegiance, and loyalty to the same,
allegiance, and loyalty to the same,
any ordinances, resolutions, or law
any ordinances, resolutions, or laws
of the State of Colorado,
of the State of Colorado,
and that I will faithfully perform all duties
and I will faithfully perform all duties
of the office of police officer,
of the office of police officer,
on which I'm about to enter,
on which I am about to enter,
and have been duly appointed, so help me God.
and have been duly appointed, so help me God.
Thank you. I don't want any comp time with poked badges. Now, please stay up here for just a moment, because I want to just talk with you just a little bit. You are experienced officers, and Mike, you have a lot of experience in being a first responder. And I want to talk to you just for a moment about the experience that you've already had. You each, the two of you, have stripes that you can put on your uniform like this. Each one of those stripes represent 5 years of service. Those 5 years of service that each one of you have, and almost 10 years, has come with pain, suffering, blood, sweat, and tears. You're here now with the Monument Police Department. I promise you, and you, that I will do everything in my power to give you the right training, the right equipment, and the right manpower to keep you safe, because as you all know, we've had a number of police officers shot in the line of duty in the Colorado Springs area. And to the wives, I want you to know we will do everything in our power to keep them safe. You have that promise from me. Thank you. Now get to work.
All right, the next item on our agenda is proclamation to name the new monument park space, the Barnhart Orchard. Cassie?
Good evening, trustees, Mayor. I will try to keep my voice up. I think I might be losing my voice, so I'll try, okay, Joe? Just to give the public a little background information here on this proclamation. In the spring, the Public Works Department got a grant, a small grant from the Colorado Tree Coalition to plant a collection of fruit trees. They're sort of rare and special fruit trees. And we're pretty proud of it, the Public Works Department. It was an undeveloped space before that, and now it has value sort of going into the future. It's sort of an investment in our future. The location is along 3rd Street beside the Santa Fe Trail, and that is where the Santa Fe rail line used to run. So this is just a small development. It's a large space, and this is just maybe phase 1 of phase 1. But we're proud of it, and we thought it could use a name. So tonight, we want to recognize an individual who played a significant role in the early days of our community. I'm happy to have Mr. Barnhart's grandchildren here, Ruth and Joe, and their grandfather was Delos Theodore Barnhart. And Mr. Barnhart moved his family here in, make sure I get this right, 1898 to manage a section of the rail line that ran through town. So the area was about the north side of the academy, our Air Force Academy, all the way up to the north edge of Monument where it heads towards Palmer Lake. And he replaced that whole section while he was the section foreman. Everyone thought he did a great job with it. He worked as section foreman all the way through retirement, and that totaled 32 years. In that time, he did some other really interesting things. He was always really forward-thinking, thinking about investing in the future for the future residents of Monument, and so that's all of us. And I know that our motto reads, proud of our past, and we think it's really fitting that we name this orchard the Barnhart Orchard after this man. I think that he was a very impressive figure in our history. Want to make sure that I don't forget anything. I really do appreciate the two of you, the history that you have and that you've kept. It's so valuable because then you can pass it on to us and we know more about our town's history. And you have both been really instrumental in filling in those gaps for us in the story of how we came to be here today. With that, I'll leave it to you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Stevens, will you read the proclamation?
Whereas in the spring of 2018, the town of Monument received a grant to plant 20 fruit trees in an undeveloped open space adjacent to the Santa Fe Trail near 3rd Street. And whereas this area is where the Santa Fe Trail line originally ran through the town of Monument, and whereas the railroads were significantly important in the establishment of Monument and surrounding areas, and whereas Delos T. Barnhart, an early resident of the town of Monument, was hired in 1898 as section foreman and began the arduous process of replacing the entire line from Husted, what is now the area of Northgate, through the town of Monument. And after two of Delos T. Barnhart's daughters died of typhoid, he persuaded the residents to build a community well and a well distributing system, now known as Well 1, that significantly improved the sanitation and dependability of the town's water system. And the Barnhart family is responsible for planting some of the oldest trees in the town limits. And whereas Delos T. Barnhart lived and loved the town of Monument for 41 years and maintained the rail line for 32, retired in 1930, raised 9 children, and whereas the town of Monument motto reads, proud of our past, confident of our future, indicating a desire of the town to recognize a civic-minded man with a prominent place in Monument's history. Now therefore, the Board of Trustees of the town of Monument, Colorado hereby proclaims the newly planted orchard space at 3rd and Santa Fe Trail to be hereafter called Barnhart Orchard. Proclaimed this 6th of August 2018.
Thank you, Cassie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Barnhart, for joining us today, and ma'am. We also have a close family friend of theirs with us, Ron Rathburn. Ron, I just want to recognize you're getting ready to celebrate 32 years with the town. Ron is our Public Works Superintendent. So thank you for your service with us. Next item on the agenda, financial report. Ms. Smith.
I'm going to do that from up here, if nobody cares. In the past, prior to this last town manager that we had, the financials were always given with a lot of detail, a lot of charts, and a lot of backup. And the then town manager wanted it to be put on the consent agenda just to hurry meetings along and not take so much time and give so much information. I thought in the wake of new members being on the board and a lot of questions coming up, that it might be better to pull the financials off and present them like I used to present them, with all the data and detail and history with them. If that's too much information, you can let me know and we won't do it, or if it's not enough, you can let me know and I can do more. But this is the quarterly financials for the second quarter of 2018. The general fund year-to-date for June 2018 through June. General fund revenues were more than budget by $296,000. General fund expenditures were less than budget by $298,000. The net to the general fund budget was $594,000 under budget, which is good. I have to put good and bad in there for Jake. He asked me that I do that way. It's mainly we haven't spent our expenditures until we see where we're going to fall during the summer. Right now, Tom's got a lot of projects going on with chip sealing, and you noticed a new sidewalks going in, and so there's a lot going to be coming up in the next few months that will change that mix a bit. The Water Enterprise Fund budget through June of 18, revenues were more than budget by $204,000. Expenses were less than budget by $210,000. And there again, that's mainly not spending capital items yet. Net water fund to budget's $414,000 under budget, which is good. All of the ancillary funds through June, their net are positive $405,606. And I just noticed it says March on there. I'm sorry, that should say June. And these funds are all budgeted for very specific projects, and so any money that's sitting there would be spent against those projects. And so I would request that the board approve the second quarter financials after any questions anyone has.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the board?
Just out of curiosity, how many large capital expenditure? You know that in December, a huge bill could come through and just throw the budget off.
It's usually through summer because
Okay.
they're public works projects or water projects, and they're usually construction related, so they happen summer, early fall. So by October, when the preliminary budget will be presented to the board, we'll have a really good indication of where we're going to sit for year end, hopefully.
Okay.
Which is what we usually base things on.
I had a question on a line item, R&E Enterprises LLC, $288,249.20. I was wondering if you could give me some background on that.
Email on that, but it wasn't an accounts payable invoice. This was a bond refund, a planning bond. So the people for the Tri-Lakes Collision that's building on Wolf Park put down a bond from their personal account, or R&E, which is Tri-Lakes Collision, in that amount. And then a week or a week and a half later, they brought in a company corporate check. So we refunded their personal check and took their corporate check. So anytime there is an account, mainly in it's the accounts that would be in the balance sheet, like D38 funds that we collect, or any planning fees that aren't fees, but planning retainers or planning bonds that we hold the money for. We hold it in a separate hollow trust account. And then when that bond's released by our planning department, we refund the bond. We refund the school monthly or quarterly, depending on how much money comes in. And so we're acting as a pass-through almost for a lot of things. So that's why that check didn't show up in accounts payable or anywhere like as an expense in the financial statements, but it was sitting as a bond, a holding bond on the balance sheets.
So the Tri-Lakes Collision put up a personal amount of $288,249.20.
Well, one company, whoever R&E is, put that up, and then they brought in, I'm assuming, the financed check for that. But we don't hold on to, I mean, the question was, this is a personal check, should we put it in the bank or just wait for them to bring in the other check? And I'm like, no, you put it in the bank. You don't hold it for 2 weeks or whatever. That's just not
so then they put that check in the bank and then came back later on
in the bank, yeah,
with another check, and then that one was given back to them. And
yes.
Gotcha.
Well, we refunded it with one of our checks because we had put their check in the bank.
And that's what this was, the refund.
That's what this was. And there will be several, if you look through the AP checks that you get quarterly. Mountain View Electric doesn't come before the board because it's a utility. When we pay the water from the general fund to the enterprise fund during the summer, sometimes that's over $5,000. and that's considered a utility, doesn't come before the board. Any pass-through accounts, we don't usually bring before the board. I mean, if you want to see all those, we can certainly do those, but normally those aren't brought before the board because they're recurring expenses and or pass-through expenses.
So to clarify, that's not listed as revenue or an expenditure anywhere on the lines. Okay, great.
Any further questions from the board? Is there?
I did have a couple more, if that's okay, if we have the time. Civics Plus, that invoice for Civics Plus, could you explain that to me?
This is an annual fee renewal. I think in the budget, I can look it up, we had closer to $10,000. This is for our website and the software that runs our website.
So this is an annual fee? And are we under contract with Civics Plus for this?
It isn't a contract per se. I mean, there's a 30-day out, and the town can't commit to anything long-term more than a year at a time because of budget constraints. So even if you sign a contract, that contract cannot go more than a year without being reaffirmed in the budget.
So this renewal is for this next year? 2019?
Mm-hmm.
And then I also had a question about West Star Masonry.
That was the monument sign as you come in on Second, the big brick, not sign, but structure that sits there. There was a person there was a wreck there and 1 or 2 cars hit it, and that was the repair of it. And the repair of it was, I know it's a little bit confusing, the repair of it was $8,500. We got a check from CIRSA for $8,500, which is in your packet. But then we also got a bill from CIRSA for $5,000, which is our deductible amount on liability insurance. So the net cost of the repair to the monument sign was $4,250. So out of all of this, we got an extra $750 from the person's insurance, and that was all.
So the way that worked is that the masonry company gave you this invoice, and then CIRSA paid $5,000.
No, CIRSA paid $8,500.
$8,500, and we had a $5,000 deductible.
Yes, so we paid $5,000 to CIRSA.
Okay, so
we paid $5,000 to CIRSA, and we got an additional $750 from this person's insurance, so that makes the net $4,250 that we had to pay out of pocket for that sign to be repaired.
I see. I was just confused because the
is
bill
confusing.
is $8,500, and then I saw the CIRSA invoice as well, and I was thinking that perhaps you would subtract that off somewhere.
Well, the reason I know it's confusing, but the reason it came was because the invoice was $8,500 originally. That's what the check's going to be for. So, you know, down the road, if somebody goes, gee, I don't remember you seeing this $8,500 invoice, like the auditors, it's good to bring it before the board then. And I know it is kind of confusing, but.
So then the masonry company actually gets a check for $8,500?
Yes, the town of Monument gave the masonry company a check for $8,500.
And then CIRSA
gave the town of Monument a check for $8,500.
And then we paid the $5,000.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. I just needed some clarification on that. It was a little
no worries.
Good.
Confusing. And then on this last invoice that came at the last minute, did we have a page 2 to that?
I did not. All I got was just this invoice that was sent to me. As you can see, the first invoice went to Mayor Kaiser, so it probably ended up in his junk mail somewhere. And I was going to call them today and didn't have a chance to, but I was going to call them tomorrow and say, you know, you need to send this directly to either finance or accounts payable, because otherwise it could be lost, because this invoice came from January 9th. There was no remittance copy attached, but the remittance copy, it looks just like this top copy.
And
She just
do
wanted
we
to mail
know,
back.
do we know who at that company sent it?
I'm
I mean,
sorry?
it doesn't seem to have any kind of contact.
Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, we have, do you sit on that one?
I sit on it.
Yeah. Mayor Wilson goes to those meetings once a month. It's very involved with all of the local governments, and it also, you know, we get grants through them and state grants through them, and so they're very, very active. And this is just our annual dues that just got.
So this will be a reoccurring cost every year?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
It'll probably be helpful during the budget process to give you a list of like CML, DOLA, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, because those are annual, and they're usually in January, which this one was. But we'll let them know, and then that could give you some idea of how many dues we do pay as a town for these different organizations.
And so if I wanted to go to a meeting like that, could I do that, or do I have to do something special?
Their public meeting, you should have a packet. He came and presented to us a couple meetings ago and gave us all a packet of all the stuff they do and the grants available. And actually, we're using one now for our downtown revitalization program.
A grant?
Yeah, they provide a lot of those kind of things. So I went to a meeting and I was surprised at how many services they provide. So I thought it was very, very helpful.
Well, I think I'll try to get to one of those meetings.
Yeah.
And we have 2 grants scheduled for 2019, and one of them fairly substantial. And there's grant matches that go along with that, but they're very active and extremely helpful to all the local governments.
Is there any additional questions on the financial report? Would anybody like to suggest a modification or the way it is?
Can we suggest modifications for future reports? Or
We can. Is it something that can be suggested now, or would it work better in an email?
I just would like to see a little more detail on the invoices as they come in, the job order number or something.
We don't use job orders, and we don't use POs. We have, Tom has, I believe, 3 contracts he can act on for engineering firms. And then everything else runs through our process, which I had emailed to you. Oh, I'm sorry about all the emails, but if I'm gonna answer one board member, I think I should answer everybody so everybody knows what's going on. So our process is any check over 500 takes 2 signatures. Any check over 5,000 comes to the board, except those I've already talked about. I don't know, other than the invoices over 5,000, it isn't customary to, I mean, I think our finance department puts in over 3,000 entries a month. So you're talking about an awful lot of detail.
So like that one invoice where that we got that has like several common knowledge technologies.
CKTs, yes.
Yeah, that was just amazing to have to go through like 40 hard drives and wow.
Well, we're trying to update the servers, and we're trying to get the police department compliant with CJIS and CBI, and a lot of that has been IT, which we didn't know until Chief Shirk was able to get this amazing young lady named Elizabeth Harms, who just is an IT whiz, and she was able to really look at all of this stuff and go, wow, this is what we need, and that's what we're working towards.
So
But we don't have an in-house IT department at this time, so CKT does all of our IT services and purchases, and supposedly get discounts through them of purchase of computers, although I've got a meeting, I think, next week to talk about state purchasing contract that might save us some money. But
so on this invoice though, they have it's just 3 or 4 different invoices without any relationship to where the hard drives went or what.
Well, the hard drives are off at the server, and the server serves the whole town. It's
Right.
not individual computers. It sits in that IT room upstairs on the 2nd floor. And if you look in there, they have a shelf system, and it's like boom, 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 and that's to upgrade the servers. And we'll probably see another one come through because I think the finance server has to be upgraded too. So.
They come here and manage that, is that right?
Yes, they do.
And do they take the old tech away, so when we're upgrading and they take all that off-site then?
Well, sometimes it's not even hardware, sometimes it's physically software,
Right.
and we've got it kind of separated in the budget, but once or twice a year, and we have an employee named Drew Anderson who's the one that's working with our IT stuff and with the streaming and unfortunately with the voice recognition on it. And there's a recycle place that we call, so they gather everything together that's, you know, and we let our computers run out, hopefully 5 years. Some of them I've just found out have been here a lot longer than that. And then the recycle place will come and take them, and Drew has verified that they recycle responsibly, and you know, they don't ship it over to some foreign country so they can ruin their country. You know, it's all done and it's authorized, and it's also guaranteed. I mean, Drew will flip the hard drives anyway, but it's guaranteed that everything is shredded and no information is allowed out.
So it's secure.
Very. Thank you.
So on the invoices though, is there any way we can, I don't know, put something where, like there's several here, so I didn't know where all of them went. But you're saying they all go to one server?
No, one of the, with each invoice, there's usually a quote that goes with it. And I apologize to Trustee Koopman. I missed the last meeting, not the special meeting, but the last meeting. I didn't realize these were two-sided invoices when they sent them to me, so I just stuck the
I was doing the math, and it did not make sense at all.
When I looked at it, I'm like, you're right, it doesn't make sense. Like the keypad, the Logitech wireless combo desktop things, those are for individuals, and if it's where its account number, like 0145 is admin, so that went to an admin staff. And it usually has a quote behind it that I approved before they order it. A lot of pages on these.
Yeah.
And then
it's kind of confusing to me also.
The cable and it's mainly cable and the three.
So I'm trying to see where that
The
number
display
would
ports and these, most of these invoices have to do with the server upgrade, and they go to 0145, which is admin. All of computer expense goes through admin, unless it's something specifically requested, or like we need the police department to be upgraded to be CJIS compliant. We show that through the police department, so we understand why that jumped up. We have a replacement for our computers. We're supposed to be replaced not longer than 5 years for every computer. I forget, we have close to 100 devices that are being managed. We're getting close to the point where we probably need in-house IT. That would be a decision for the next manager to make, not me. So, but most of these invoices that you have here are to upgrade the server. And if you see if they're 0145, that means that's
and where do I see that 145?
Where it says payment approval, the account number on the invoices.
Oh, okay.
Like 49 is planning, 51 is police.
I see. So
30 is
so there is something here to track it back with.
Yes.
Is there a chart that we can have, or we need something that says
project? What?
Yeah, like 45 is
yeah.
admin and
sure.
so forth. That way we know.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense when you look at that. But there's just several here that it just seemed like, why did they put it on so many different pages too? But probably because of the description.
Because they will ask for stuff at different times. When Jeff is our CKT person. He comes every Wednesday to troubleshoot. And he's the one that worked on the server for several days. And he will see something, or he'll be working on someone's computer and they need this, or they need supplies, or they need this. So they ask me first, because right now I'm over IT. They will send me a quote. Sarah Galinsky usually send me a quote, which is attached to most of these invoices here. And I'll make sure where it's going and if it's needed, and then I will authorize the quote, and then they invoice and order it. So the reason there's so many is for everything that Jeff finds, or it's actually a separate request or a separate quote.
I see. And so then they give you an individual
and
bill.
It's done basically weekly.
Okay. Okay. So in the future, I'll take a look at those dates too. I just thought that
and
was
I'll get that to you all. I mean, it's in the financials, but I'm so used to them, I don't think about it. So I'll get you the little cheat sheet.
Any other questions or comments on the financial report? Seeing none, I'll move forward. Ordinance number.
Can you approve those, please?
Oh, okay. Do we have a motion to approve the second quarter financial report?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the second quarter financial report.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Clark?
No.
Trustee Bornstein? Absent. Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Kootman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
That motion passes 4-1. Next item on the agenda, ordinance number 12-2018, an ordinance approving an amendment to the preliminary PD site plan for Connexus. Ms. Jones.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Let's give it just a second for presentation. I have two ordinances before you tonight. The first ordinance is Ordinance 12. This was Project DA 09-2018. Major amendment to the preliminary PD site plan for the Connexus project, which you heard not too long ago. So just as a reminder, the area we're talking about is highlighted in yellow on this slide. This is located between I-25 and Old Denver Road. That is the Trails End neighborhood that you see at the top of the slide. And the Monument Ice Rinks to the west, and then the Wagons West development, which you will be hearing again here shortly, on the other side of Old Denver. So a summary of this project, it's a little over 23 acres in that area just described. The zoning and preliminary PD site plan was approved by this board back in February, so not too long ago. The applicant is back before you tonight to propose a single change to the preliminary PD site plan. They're proposing to add one additional permitted use, and that's religious facilities and institutions. There is a caveat there listed in the preliminary PD site plan with that. That use would be permitted as long as it did not occupy more than 25% of the total acreage of the property. So that was added there to sort of maintain the business park integrity. So that would be a permitted use with that one stipulation. So we discussed this with the applicant a bit. A church or a religious facility, however you want to term that, it's not a typical business park use in some respects, but there were no real issues identified, no specific conflicts were identified to be a concern at this time. The change in the use was analyzed in a revised traffic analysis. It was not extreme, but it was a slight reduction. So it was felt that there was no issue there with that change in the proposed allowable uses. And again, as with any of the proposed uses in this preliminary PD site plan, when a particular user is ready to develop, development would come back before the Planning Commission and before the board with a final PD site plan. And at that time, obviously, we would again review all the specifics of that project, the size or the architecture, all the things that we always bring before you. So it would certainly come back before you. So this is just simply adding that one additional permitted use. So this item did go before your Planning Commission in July. There was no public comment on the item. There was some discussion with the Planning Commission about potentially, could a potential religious institution then want to add an elementary school or full-time childcare or something like that, and that was something that the Planning Commission was somewhat concerned about, again, as a separate full-time use rather than as a part of what I'm going to call sort of a typical church use, if that makes sense. And we can certainly get into that more if we need to, but so they did express a little bit of concern about that. They did speak with the applicant about that. And then where they ended up was the Planning Commission recommends approval with conditions, and the one condition that they wanted to add was that there would be no separately licensed school or child care allowed, just to ensure again, that because they did have concerns if that were to be the case, so they didn't want to add that one stipulation. And staff is available to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
Do we have the authority to make these exceptions for schools and what was that? Schools and childcare, daycare?
So
do we want to get involved with that?
That's before us, yes. Jennifer,
I think she's asking, or maybe the way I understand the question is she asking about the constitutionality, whether we can regulate the functions of a church?
I don't think we can. I don't think constitutionally we are able to. I think we can approve this amendment without the conditions. I don't think that.
Ms. Jones, can you shed any light on that?
Sure. So this project was brought before this board as a planned development, and therefore the applicant at that time outlined the specific uses that would be allowed. So any use not listed is prohibited. So they came, at that time the preliminary PD site plan was approved with a list of roughly 13 uses, right? An example would be eating establishments except drive-through restaurants, right? And there was a whole list of them. Religious institutions was not included in that list, and so they are asking to add that. They are not asking for there to be an additional, again, school facility or anything like that as a part of it. So I have discussed it somewhat with our town attorney, and we didn't feel that there was an issue with that. It was simply, basically an additional precaution. I think you could also argue that those uses would not be allowed because they're not listed, but the Planning Commission wanted to make that expressly clear that they would have additional concerns if it was a church with a preschool or something along those lines. And so they felt that they wanted to add that. Certainly this board could take that condition off if they didn't feel it was necessary.
Okay.
Are we talking about a church, or are we talking about an overly broad term, religious facility? And I see those as two very different things.
Sure.
So from as you're requesting this to be approved, are you asking for the approval to include the use of a church as in a place of religious worship, or what constitutes a religious facility? And I don't see that anywhere in here. And then you're opening up a whole can of worms.
Potentially. Both of those words were used by the applicant in their request, and so I'll certainly maybe let them address if they feel comfortable eliminating that more so. Religious institutions and facilities is a pretty broad term. We cannot, I wouldn't imagine that we would want to allow church, that's such a specific word. Right, although I believe that word was used. I used that word, as did the applicant, as simply a descriptive word that's commonly used, right, to sort of what I believe the applicant has a potential user that would be a church on this site, if that makes sense. But certainly if they had a different user that wanted to build a synagogue or a mosque or any other type of temple or facility, that would be allowed. I don't know if that answers your question.
And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about more so other organizations or types of services other than a place of religious worship to come in under the guise of a religious facility.
It is certainly a broad term.
Yeah.
I think by design. So if this board wanted to discuss that with the applicant of modifying that, again, any user though would come back with a final PD site plan where we would have details, how is it going to work on the site and those types of land use concerns.
So if something decides to go under this category, it will come before the board again?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But to add an approved use of a religious facility and then to try to minimize that at a later date would limit our ability to do so.
I would certainly think so, yes. This would be allowing that use.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Jennifer or Ms. Jones?
Actually, I have a question of the town attorney. What do you think of the constitutionality of adding the provision of no school and no daycare?
Well, I think it was here that they didn't want a separately licensed facility, is that correct? So if there is a religious institution that has like a daycare as part of the program or service, that would be fine. We didn't want you to.
Oh, okay, okay.
Of business.
That makes better sense, okay. Thank you.
Do we have a presentation from the applicant?
Good evening, Andrea Barlow with NES, representing Shut Communities, who are the applicants. I have a presentation also. I'll try not to repeat too much of Jennifer's presentation. So the location, I think you're pretty familiar with, 23.34 acre property. I just wanted to point out that Shut Communities also has control of the land to the north of this parcel, which together goes all the way almost up to 105 2nd Street, and in total that's about 170 acres. So they see this development as really being the catalyst to get moving on this area that has been undeveloped and it has been zoned for industrial and business related uses since the 80s. So that's something to bear in mind as we go through. As Jennifer said, this was approved back in February. It was approved, the rezoning to PD from PID, which was a purely industrial zoning. We relaxed the zoning to make it a little bit more business oriented as opposed to purely industrial. And the PD site plan that was approved at the time was set parameters for what we were looking to do in terms of the overall context of the development, but didn't actually provide any detailed site plan. We do have a plan which I'll show you in a second, but it was always intended just to set parameters. And it also set the permitted uses, the architectural and design standards, and the landscape standards. Okay, it's a little slow. So this was the kind of the illustrative plan we put forward, and this is what we kind of envisioned. We always knew it wouldn't come out exactly like that. But the things that will stay the same, the open space tracks to the north and south. Obviously this is changed orientation now, just so I can fit it on the slide. So those open space tracks, which are also, one of them is for detention, drainage, and the access point will stay the same, but the internal configuration is likely to vary. We had certain requirements on the preliminary plan that we wouldn't exceed a certain amount of square footage on the overall site, and then one building wouldn't be more than 50,000 square feet. So all those elements are still staying in place. So the only thing we're really looking at changing is the permitted uses. These are the uses that were approved originally. As you can see, there's no religious institution there, and there is no school or daycare there. So as Jennifer correctly pointed out, that based on the permitted uses, you can only those are the only allowed uses. Anything outside of that isn't allowed. So it's not like it's a broader context. The purpose of the PD zoning is to define the uses. It's slow. Okay. So currently we're asking for the religious facility and institutions, and that terminology is basically, it comes out of the zoning ordinance from the code. It's consistent with other codes. So I appreciate the comment that it's a bit broader than just a church or a religious institution in terms of what you might traditionally consider church, synagogue, mosque. It allows a church to have other facilities such as daycare or Sunday school, and so it encompasses a broad grouping of what you might expect to see at a religious institution. One of the challenges, as I say, it's very consistent with other codes, Colorado Springs, El Paso County. The criticism, I suppose, I would have of the monument zoning code, and it's come up a lot, and is that you don't have any definitions of what those uses are. Yeah. So what we don't want to do, or I don't think we should be doing, and we've had this discussion with Planning Commission, is defining those uses through individual planning, zoning efforts. It should be an amendment to your code to actually define the uses, and it's consistent across the board. We had this very discussion on all the use categories that I previously identified. What's an industrial supply facility? Well, it's a standard zoning terminology, and if I went to El Paso County or Colorado Springs, I could go into their definition section of the code and it would tell me exactly what that comprises. So I think that's something that the code needs to address rather than trying to address it on a case-by-case basis. So going back, as we noted that we're going to limit it to 25% of this site because that's kind of consistent, approximately 5 acres, just over 5 acres. That in this case it is a church that's interested in the property. And all the other permitted uses will remain the same, and all the existing approved architectural design and landscaping standards will stay the same. So preliminary plan review criteria, I'm not going to go through them all because a lot of them really weren't affected by what we were trying to do here. So we felt that these first 2 criteria deal with encouraging a mix of land uses, compatibility with the surrounding area, adequate buffer, and we feel that the church would fit in with the mix of uses that are in the area that's been proposed. Existing residential, proposed business park, existing recreational facilities, just that general area is a mix of uses. And we feel that the church would be generally compatible. I think Jennifer mentioned that the traffic study showed a slight decrease in traffic. That's average daily traffic. Of course, we all know that the church will generate the majority of its traffic when it's having its services, but they will have their own traffic control when they have their services. Consistency with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan shows it as a mixed-use area. I think I've kind of already discussed the mix of uses in the area and how I think that fits right in with what's been proposed in this area. The one issue which I thought would come up, and so I wanted to tackle it head on, was the fact that we now have a religious facility that will be going into an area that is identified as a business park, which is a non-profit and won't be paying taxes. But we consider that this is a real important project for as a catalyst to this development because, as I said earlier, we're looking at the whole 170 acres, of which will be business park. This is a small proportion of that, 5 acres of 170 acres. And this area has been stagnant for years, and this developer is excited about having somebody who wants to actually develop here, and as soon as you get one person in, you'll get others coming. And it will also extend services, utilities to that area, so that will pay to get the utilities into the site, and then that will stem from there and trigger development of the rest of the area. So we feel on that basis, the question that we have to answer for the preliminary plan review criteria of its fiscal impact is positive, and also just generally the benefit to the town. I mean, there aren't many zonings actually in your town that allow religious institutions. They are not allowed in many of the zones, so this is a good opportunity for them. And I think on that basis, that's pretty much all I wanted to say. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Do we have any questions for the applicant?
So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot, but I know you're limited on what you can answer. Have you had interest from churches in that particular property?
Yes, there is. This amendment to the uses is triggered by a specific interest from a church.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? This is a public hearing item, so I'll open it up to the public for anyone who would like to speak for this item. Ms. Hayes.
Terry Hayes, and I'm going to put on my Tri-Lakes Economic Development hat on right now. In general, churches, especially in this particular sector, they're not going to do anything for us, but they're also not going to harm us at all. And like Andrea pointed out, you need that first person to break ground. A lot of businesses aren't really willing to take that chance, but churches tend to have fiscal support behind them, so they will be the first one in, and I'm hoping once that happens, we will see more further development in that particular area. I wholeheartedly support the idea of excluding schools and daycare within this church. And what no one has said yet, the main reason why is that it could hinder future development of restaurants. We have a, ordinance that says you cannot have any place that serves alcohol within 500 feet of a place where there's a school or a daycare. So if a restaurant wanted to go into that same little complex, that is what's going to hinder this. I've spoken to shut communities, and they said this church does not want to do that. That's not in their plans, but I still want it in writing because you never know what's going to happen 15 years from now. If they don't agree to that, or you feel uncomfortable doing that, then I want to see them have a waiver that a restaurant that has a bar in it can go in right next door to them, and they're not going to fight it. So I just worry about the future development in that community, but I think it is a great first start, and I think it will hopefully realize, okay, now we got utilities now, right? Now we got everything else, and people will start getting interested and they'll start getting excited about the development. So I request that you approve this with the Planning Commission's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak for this item? Seeing none, is there anyone who would like to speak against this item? Okay.
I'm not for or against it, but I also know they had a noise thing they were going to keep with the building of this area, because we were talking about veterinarian stuff and kennels, and they couldn't have kennels outside because that would create noise outside. So how are they going to restrict a church from making noise outside?
Is there anyone else that would like to speak against this item? Would the applicant like to rebuttal?
Just very quickly, I just wanted to clarify that the applicant has absolutely no problem with the condition that was proposed by the Planning Commission. In fact, we suggested it because it was kind of getting bogged down on the discussion. So we suggested it as a means of kind of finding common ground, and so we're happy with that condition. Regarding the noise, there was nothing specific that restricted any use. The external storage is restricted by the PD site plan conditions, and in terms of the uses, we discussed kennels, but there wasn't any specific restriction on that at the hearing. So I just wanted to say that there weren't any specific restrictions. We identified kennels as an accessory use, so we envisioned it as being a kennels that might be accessory to a veterinary surgery, so that they could have overnight facility for pets. But it wasn't intended to be an isolated use, and so but there was no specific restrictions related to noise, and I really would not anticipate a church making any noticeable external noises that could be controlled in that way. So,
thank you.
But just can we see?
Okay.
Just as a. I'm not necessarily against a church being there, but Tammy did make a point on that. Is if you're allowing a church that might be quiet, you're going to have to allow a different one that may not be so quiet with bells and chimes that ring during different times of the night and day and year,
5 a.m.
depending on the religion. So that would cause a noise issue potentially for people that live close to there, like myself. And others that are around. So, so I guess that's kind of the issue. And usually, if you have a church that has a Sunday school for kids, they usually have a little playground outside. Probably wouldn't cause a lot of noise, but I don't know. That's where probably the outdoor stuff would come in. Those are just thoughts. I was more thinking about the bells though, and I don't know.
Can I say one thing? Well, I was just saying the restrictions wasn't from you guys for the restriction of the Planning Commission. When I attended the presentation, you guys said you were putting those restrictions on. Yes, you did. Yeah, you did.
No, we didn't.
Because we had a big discussion about the
Point of
kennel
order.
and how it would be out there and how smell wouldn't be outside, so.
Thank you.
Mayor Wilson, would you ask the applicant if they have anything further to say since we allowed two other individuals to speak?
Okay. I'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion or motion. Okay, do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to, I'm trying to find it here with my glasses, I'm sorry. I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 12-2018, an ordinance approving an amendment to the preliminary PD site plan for Connexus.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes. That motion passes 6-0. Ordinance number 13-2018, an ordinance approving final PD site plan and final plat of Wagons West filing number 1. Ms. Jones.
Good evening again. Ordinance 13-2018 is the next item before the board tonight. This is the Wagons West project, a final PD site plan and final plat. To again familiarize you with the area, this is across the street. On the west side of Old Denver Road, again directly across from the area we just discussed for the Connexus project, south of the Trails End neighborhood, north of the Monument Ice Rinks. This project is about over 34 acres, and you've heard this project as well. The annexation, plan development zoning, and a preliminary PD site plan were approved by this board in December. Now the applicant is back before you with a final PD site plan and a final plat. Both of those are consistent with the approved preliminary plans. The conditions of approval from the preliminary plans have also been satisfied. So just a graphic here to sort of orient you and remind you of the proposal in the area that we mentioned on the west side of Old Denver Road. This is a project, a residential project that includes townhomes and single-family attached homes. The single-family attached are the reddish, pinkish colored ones on the north side, and then the orange are the townhomes on the south side. And there are 2 access points off of Old Denver Road. That consists of 131 lots with that breakdown, 54 single-family attached and 77 townhomes. There's a lot of open space in this project. As you can see, 14 acres natural floodplain space, undisturbed creek area. There's also a park and additional open space, tracks and trails. So again, that's a highlight of this project, but it was heard before you in December, and again, it is completely consistent, so there's nothing new here tonight. This final plans were heard before the Planning Commission in July. Again, there was no public comment on this item. That's unusual. I don't usually bring you projects with no public comment. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of Project 03-2018 or Ordinance 13 as it's before you tonight, and there were no conditions. The Planning Commission felt that it met the standards and criteria for approval. And staff is available to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Jones? Okay. Does the applicant have a presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Scott Smith. I'm the CEO for Proterra Properties, and I just want to thank you for hearing this item tonight. Proterra and our staff have a great deal of positive experience in developing, managing, and completing projects in El Paso County. We definitely have a commitment to success, and we have a track record. The builder that we're working with is J.M. Weston Homes, and they are also a significant and successful builder, and in fact our headquarters right here in Monument. We have established a market demand and need for this product type in this area. So I just wanted to, number one, just, water is a very important issue, and I just wanted to just cover a few items on water. So the first one is, my helpful assistant here is pushing the button. So the town engineering consultant has determined a sufficient existing water supply to serve the project. That we are going to be employing water conservation measures in both home water use and landscaping. So that's going to be an important part of the development of the project. The water tap fees, I actually made a bad assumption, but the water tap fees actually will be closer to $2 million that would be paid to the town of Monument for tap fees, going towards capital construction and other needs. The project has already contributed all of its associated water rights, and that's already in excess of the town's requirements. And an additional water development fee payment of $60,000 will be made at the time of final plat. And of course, the added customers will improve the town's tax base and financial capabilities. And just to kind of briefly review the amount of, the financial considerations, the water tap fees again will be closer to $2 million. Drainage, park, and traffic fees will add up to about $161,000. The sewer fees paid to the Monument Sanitation District will be well over $1 million. And there'll be school land fees paid of over $65,000. So actually the overall average per unit fees paid by the individual residents will be between $22,000 and $25,000 per unit. So I just wanted to make sure I give you a quick overview, and I'm going to turn this over to Andrea, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Andrea Barlow, and yes again. So just to recap, the location is on the east side of the railroad, west of Old Denver Road, north of the ice rink. The preliminary plan was approved in December. It was also part of an annexation, as you may recall. There was an annexation of the ice rink to the south was in the town. Trails End to the north was in the town. This little parcel wasn't in the town, so it was annexed in at the same time, and that was accompanied by an annexation agreement. And at that time, we rezoned it to planned development, and also the preliminary PD site plan was approved. So this is a plan you just saw that Jennifer showed you, 54 attached single family, 77 townhomes. The main streets will be public. The alleys that the townhomes will come off will be private alleys, and there will be a central park area, detention pond, and then the area to the north is alongside the creek and all the way to the Trails End neighbourhood to the north will stay as open space. This is our request. This is the plan we submitted, not coloured plan, but I just wanted to show you that this is exactly the same. I mean, we didn't change anything. I think we slightly adjusted the location of the future well site that the town asked for. The lift station is shown there in the same location. The roads are the same. Just had to tweak it, try and make it meet the town's engineering criteria a little bit more accurately, but otherwise it's exactly the same. And the final subdivision plat, which we've also submitted, reflects this lot layout. So, consistent with the executed annexation agreement, I just wanted to highlight that this was actually included in the annexation agreement, that provided that the preliminary PD site plan is consistent with the final plan is consistent with the preliminary plan, that really the town should approve it, that there's really no good reason not to approve it if it's consistent. And the latter part of that talks about the zoning, which obviously was approved at the time the annexation was approved. Consistency with the comprehensive plan, it's part of the same mixed-use area as I was discussing with the Connexus project, so we have that same mix of uses. The different types of residential are contributing to that. The green area to the north of the site is the area that we're retaining as open space. That's identified as parks and recreation area, so it's consistent with that, keeping it as open space. It's not accessible open space, just so I can verify that, because it is mouse habitat, so it's being conserved because of the mouse habitat. The residential attached definition in the comprehensive plan includes patio homes, duplexes, townhomes, we're consistent with that, and it encourages those sort of uses as a transition from like non-residential uses of the ice rink to the south between a single family, so we're providing a nice transition in uses, and also importantly it provides a more affordable housing product in Monument. So I just want to touch on the type of product for the moment. These are the single family attached. They've not actually been built yet, so you've just got a rendering at the moment. But it just gives you an idea of what to expect. 2-car garages, driveways, lots will have their own yards, 2 to 3 bedrooms, and they're going to be in the mid to high 200,000 price range. And they're trying to attract people are moving up families, and also empty nesters. The townhomes are these are an example from Gold Hill Mesa, and they're going to be very similar to this, maybe possibly slightly different colours, but I think otherwise they're going to be the same, and they're a slightly lower price range. So they're really trying to attract young professionals, young families, people trying to get into the housing market. This is a slide I provided when we did the preliminary plan, just showing that about 90% of the existing housing stock in Monument is single-family residential. There's very little that's serving that more affordable market. And the slide on the right is showing that at the time when we did this presentation in I think it was December, the average house price had increased significantly in that year, up to I think, I can't read it from here, but I think it's 465,000. And what I would like to show you now is how much it's increased in the last year. So the top left is the exact same slide I showed before, and this is an update, and it's gone up nearly 70,000 for the average home price. So the situation's not getting any better, put it that way, and there's more of a need than ever for more affordable housing. So I really want to do that recap because I'm aware that there are new board members from when I made the presentation in December, so kind of just a refresher there, and happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board for Ms. Barlow or Mr. Smith? Seeing none, thank you. This is a public hearing item, so I'll open it up to the public. Would anybody like to speak for this item? Ms. Hayes.
Me again. Trey Hayes, Charlie Chamber of Commerce in DC. We normally don't really get involved in residential. However, when residential is going to help our workforce, then we do. This particular community I'm very excited about because it's actually going to help 2 underserved communities, in my personal opinion. One, the young professionals, as they're starting out in their careers. They're young, they have the young kids. They want to be up here for our beautiful school district that we have up here. And the retirees. So a lot of them have their gigantic homes in Woodmore. They don't want to have to maintain their acre lot, their trees, their huge houses, but they should not necessarily be forced to leave a community that they live there for, in some cases, decades. So this allows them a place that they can downsize, where the outside is mostly taken care of for them, and they get to live in the community that they have grown to love. So I think this is great for both of those sectors, and I recommend that you approve this.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak for this?
Hi there, Haley Chapin with Trail Lakes Cares. A lot of the community members that we serve that are faced with situational poverty, where they live in a nice home or they live in Woodmore and are struggling to make ends meet, this provides a nice bracket for them to be able to still reside in this area that they like so much, still keep their kids in the school district, and still stay in their community. And I very much want to support having affordable housing like this in our community that many of the clients that we serve would be able to benefit from so much.
Thank you. Jess?
I actually just have a couple of questions, and I apologize if it is a little bit late in the process, because it probably would have been better at a planning commission meeting. But in the hopes that the developer could answer 2 questions. One is that park space that is the mouse habitat. I am wondering whose responsibility it would fall on to maintain it as an open space, because what I've observed excuse me, what I've observed in the past is the mouse habitat is overrun with weeds, and they're noxious weeds which are required to be mitigated. And so if it's one of those things where they set the land aside and no one is designated as responsible for it, it becomes a problem, a major problem, and it's actually the opposite of maintaining a habitat for the mouse. And it becomes everyone's problem. And so I'm just curious what the plan is for that, if it will be an HOA responsibility or not. And the second question I had was if the price of the homes is going to be adjusted due to the increase in our house values, the median house values, or are they going to try to stick to what was sort of advertised early on, because I am wholeheartedly in agreement that we need that more affordable bracket for the retirees and the young professionals. I felt that way for a long time, and I was really happy to hear that. And just since the beginning of this project, the discussion of the project, the house values have just reached a fever pitch. So I'm not sure if we're able to.
We'll have a rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak for this item? Seeing none, is there anybody that would like to speak against this item? Seeing none, Ms. Barlow, would you like to rebuttal? Mr. Smith?
I'm very happy to answer that question. As far as the long-term maintenance of the mouse habitat, that's contemplated in the Metro District. So that would be one of the duties of the Metro District to maintain that area. And then the second part of it is the prices are going to be set by the market. So, these are kind of the going prices that our builder anticipates starting with, but it's all supply and demand. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll bring it back to the board for further discussion or motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
Motion to approve ordinance number 13-2018, an ordinance approving final PD site plan and final plat of the Wagons West filing number 1.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
No.
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-1. Next item on the agenda is a resolution number 23-2018. Ms. Corley.
As has been mentioned earlier tonight, when the board annexed this property back in December, it was contemplated at that time that a Metro District would be needed for this property. Tonight is the public hearing on the service plan for the Metro District. Notice has to be published in the paper and mailed out, which has been done, and proof of that has been provided to you in the packet. The service plan has to contain certain information, which was also detailed in the packet. There was a compliance checklist that lists out each of the components that must be included in the service plan, and then on the right-hand column it showed you where that information was contained in the service plan. There are statutory criteria for approval of the service plan. It's also detailed in the memo that you have before you, and then they're recited again in the resolution itself. Sufficient existing and projected need for the service in the area. The existing service in the area to be served by the special district is inadequate. The proposed special district is capable of providing economical and sufficient service to the area, and the area to be included in the special district has or will have the financial ability to discharge the proposed indebtedness. At the time this property was annexed into the town,
the annexation agreement stated that the Metro District would have a mill levy cap of 50 mills, and that service plan has that maximum mill levy of 50 mills. The service plan is going to authorize the district to issue $5 million in bonds. The services that the district will be providing, one of those was mentioned by Mr. Smith a minute ago, the maintenance of that open space, which is the mouse habitat. Then there's some interior, I guess, non-dedicated streets that have to be maintained in between the townhomes, and then a detention pond. And the applicant is here tonight, and I believe has a presentation for the board as well.
The applicant.
If I can operate this. Greetings once again, and thank you very much for your consideration tonight. I'd like to try to run through some information on the proposed Wagons West Metropolitan District for your information. I also have with me tonight, I have Brooke Hutchins, who's with our underwriter, D.A. Davidson, will be coming up for a minute. And I also have at my disposal is our district counsel to answer any detailed questions you might have. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So metropolitan districts. So several years ago, Colorado put into place Title 32 districts. They were created to serve the public use, and they promote the health, safety, property security, and general welfare of the inhabitants of these districts. Cities and towns also, in the past 35 years, have really adopted more of a user pay type of a concept. So the idea is that the infrastructure that's required by new development gets paid for by the people that are going to inhabit it in the future. So districts have become a very common way to fund those improvements. So the districts also allow the ability to fund those improvements through bond issues. So the future owners pay for these public improvements instead of through their through the property price, they pay them through a property tax. So this really provides some advantages so that homeowners can afford more house because they're going to be qualified based upon their income, and also the future payments they're going to need to make. So this is really a common way to fund those public improvements. So it also gives us access to longer term financing, and so we're able to get these bonds at a lower interest rate. So the district formation funding is very common practice. There are over 2,500 metro districts in Colorado, and there are 16 currently operating in Monument. So the responsibilities of the Metropolitan District, first and foremost, is to basically build the public improvements. And so that's just part of our PD site plan process, that we have certain improvements that are properly public improvements. And the primary one is the sanitary sewer lift station. I want to just make sure that you know that we're not causing overlapping services. The Metropolitan District for the lift station is going to be building the lift station. In fact, we're right now in the process of gaining the approvals through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and we're also working with the Monument Sanitation District. And so this lift station will be constructed and will be just given to the Monument Sanitation District as part of their facilities. So this will be a new facility that will be part of their assets. We're also going to be doing roadway improvements on Old Denver Highway, which will be traffic safety improvements. There'll also be stormwater management systems in the project to manage stormwater, and so we've got a detention pond and then other collection systems to make sure that the water is being released under all the rules and regs from CDPHE and others, and the Army Corps of Engineers. We also will have park improvements that will be constructed by the district, and so those park improvements will serve those residents, but it's going to be open to the public. And then again, we'll have water and sanitary sewer main lines, and all the water main lines that are going to be constructed will be contributed to town of Monument. So this district won't be providing the service, they're just building the assets and then contributing them to the service providers. The maintenance responsibilities excuse me, will be primarily the park maintenance, stormwater pond and facilities, the mouse habitat, and then also the interior streets that are non-public. And then in order to try to prevent overlapping government, we're going to also have, this district will have the ability to enforce the protective covenants, just to make sure that the property maintains high qualities and does it in the most efficient way. So the safeguards that are built into this district is, first and foremost, is the service plan. The service plan really is kind of the constitution for the district. And so the district, when you approve the service plan, the district has to operate under that approved service plan. So it's really important that we make that comment up front. So it's a limited purpose district. It's only really going to be for the services that we called out before and to construct those assets. It's going to have a maximum mill levy of 50 mills. So that's required by the annexation agreement. So that's already required by the town. We agreed to that. Again, there will be no overlapping services. And construction standards will be in line with what the town of Monument requires. So this will still be subject to all the requirements by the town of Monument. Every one of them. There's no default provisions built into the bonds. So in the past, I'm sure you've heard of horror stories of districts that have had really high mill levies and things like that. Well, in Brooke will get into this in more detail, but in the bond issue, that the bond owners will take these bonds knowing that they can't go into default. And so if there's a slow payment for some reason, that is not going to be a burden of the homeowners. That's a risk that the bond holders will take. And that's become pretty common. The specific advantages to the Wagons West Metro District include the fact that it's a smaller project. And so therefore, when we issue the bonds, the assessed valuation will be pretty well substantiated. So our bond holders will have a better idea about what the tax base will be, so that provides a level of certainty. And then in order to make that happen, the developer will provide the front end funding for those improvements. And then last but not least, I said that one. So the Wagons West Metro District meets the comprehensive plan parameters. So the Monument Comprehensive Plan anticipates the continued use of metro districts as long as they meet the specified criteria. So in Chapter 6 in implementation and action item number 3, it just says that look towards special metro district consolidation for the delivery of water and sanitation district services. This kind of came up during our hearing on our Planning Commission hearing a couple weeks ago. I want to make sure that it was clear that that part of the comprehensive plan is talking about the competing service between water and sewer providers, of which this metro district will not be a part of that. And then my eyesight's not good enough to see that far away, but it just basically talks in the comprehensive plan about how the comprehensive plan shall develop parameters to make sure that the districts make sense and work financially. And all improvements will meet the comprehensive plan action number 3 parameters. We also meet the required criteria under the annexation agreement. So I'm not going to read through the annexation agreement requirements, but this is the paragraph out of our annexation agreement. That basically it's important to the development of Wagons West that this metro district be set up, and so we have just made that part of the discussion all along. So this isn't really any new concept, and we're doing it in compliance with the needs. And then the Wagons West Metro District meets all the statutory criteria that are set under Title 32 districts under state law, which is adopted by counties and by municipalities across the state. So those criteria specifically is that there's a sufficient existing and projected need for organized service in the area to be serviced by the proposed special district. Existing service in the area to be served by the proposed special district is inadequate for present and projected needs. The proposed special district is capable of providing economical and sufficient service to the area within its proposed boundaries. And the area to be included in the proposed special district has or will have the financial ability to discharge the proposed indebtedness on a reasonable basis. So under the projected need, which I won't reread that, but construction of the necessary public improvements is required by the town of Monument to sufficiently serve the Wagons West residents. And so we've already been through the types of public improvements that we will. Inadequate existing service. So basically what we have here is that the projected required services that will expand the service of the town, the Monument Sanitation District, are non-existent or not otherwise to be constructed. The project will provide the
ice rink.
It's going to help with the ice rink with the sanitary sewer needs. Right now that ice rink is served by a septic system, so this is going to provide the opportunity to eliminate that septic system and put it into the water or the wastewater facilities by the Monument Sanitation District. And it'll provide funding for the required improvements in the funding mechanism for perpetual maintenance needs of the project that would not otherwise be provided by the mouse habitat. So economical sufficient service. So the existing metro districts in the area range between 30 and 65 mils. So this is definitely right in the kind of the middle of what the expectations would be for a metropolitan district. And so, based upon our estimated future financial projections, the annual taxes to a resident would be about $995. But you got to remember that's offset with the fact that it'll offset what would be a price increase of about $16,500 to the end price of the house. So that's kind of, I wanted to give an idea of kind of the balance and the trade-off of why you do a metro district. And the district will provide adequate and perpetual maintenance of the open space habitat and the non-public streets. And then the financial ability, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brooke to kind of walk through the financial ability.
Good evening, my name is Brooke Hutchins. I'm the Vice President with Davidson. We do public financing banking, and we were tasked with providing the service plan, financial plan that you have in your packet. So this plan supports the infrastructure reimbursements of approximately $2.3 million, and it facilitates the development we've been discussing. Our plan assumes that the district levies 50 mils for both combined district debt service and operations, as per the previous discussions. The modeling that you have includes 2 series of bonds, one issued in 2018 and the second modeled to be issued in 2028 that refunds the 18 bonds. In total, that's 40 years of a debt service and operations levy. And after that 40-year period, the debt service levy would terminate. So really the plan of finance and the goal of the plan was to show the bonds are feasible to be repaid in 40 years with the 50 mil combined debt service and operations cap. And then I would say, in addition to the service plan, there are other constraints that will limit the issuance of these bonds and protect the interests of taxpayers. For example, one of them is that the 50 mil cap remains in place and bondholders have the risk of those bonds not being repaid. The mill couldn't go above 50 no matter what could happen in the future with the home prices. You also have requirements when you issue debt that the bonds be feasible at that point as well in order to get a tax-exempt opinion from bond counsel. And there's also oversight on projections by the market itself. So the service plan is one layer of protection that homeowners would have.
Thank you, Brooke. So in the event we have approval, the next steps for the Metro District would be that we would submit this to the district court to call an election, and then there would be a certification of ballot by the district court, and then the formation election would occur on November 6th on election day. So this is in line with regular election dates in Colorado. And then the district court will enter into an order organizing Watkins West Metro District. So with that, I'm willing to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Mr. Smith?
I
Trustee
have a
Clark.
couple.
Sure.
Will there be any special financing for the end user, for the purchaser, offered in the sale of these units?
That is a question for our builder.
Okay.
Special financing?
Special interest rate, provisions, incentives, closing cost assistance?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And then on the cable and broadband utilities section of that plan, I see it's $0 allotted for that. Is there a provision for that?
It will absolutely be provided in the development. We just didn't include it in the main public improvements.
But it will be included?
Mm-hmm.
Great. And then just one more, guys, I'm sorry. So this habitat, it was my understanding that you were not supposed to disturb the habitat. Is that incorrect, my assumption on that?
Well, there are definitely certain measures that you can take in order to absolutely preserve the habitat and then make sure that there's methodologies that U.S. Fish and Wildlife proposes in order to control things like the noxious weeds and just maintain the habitat in its, I guess, its most native form. So there certainly are protocol for that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, this resolution is a public hearing item, so I'll open it up to the public for anyone who would like to speak for this item. Seeing none, anybody who would like to speak against this item? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion or a motion. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 23-2018, resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Monument, Colorado, approving the service plan for Wagons West Metropolitan District.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
Yes.
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
That motion passes 6-0. Next resolution, resolution number 21-2018, a resolution authorizing the town manager to sign a contract for code enforcement services. Ms. Smith.
In July of 17, the board authorized the town manager to sign a contract for code enforcement services. At the time, we were paying around $42,000 a year salary for a code enforcement officer, and that didn't include benefits and benefits. And so they entered into a contract with community preservation specialists, and they have provided code enforcement services for the last year. We've had no negative feedback regarding the services provided. Staff has been pleased with the performance. That would be Larry oversees some of it, and Tom Tharnish oversees some of it. The only suggested change to the contract is to allow for an extra day during the winter months, and the way that she does this, quite honestly, is she takes a number of hours per year and she tracks those hours. So she may not use as much in the winter, and then come the summer, instead of 2 hours, she might use 6. So, but she tracks it by hour, and she has some pretty extensive spreadsheets and things that shows what she does. You currently do not have code enforcement in the town because that expired July 31st. I think Susie has done a very good job. Like I say, we've had no complaints, no citizen complaints, no staff complaints, no board complaints to date. She does come biannually, I think, and present to the board stats and what's going on with code. I think that having a contract for the code enforcement makes sense, rather than trying to have an employee that's busy all summer and not doing anything all winter. And currently she's right in the middle of a code issue that's just kind of stagnant right now because she's not here. We requested her to do no work until we can get this straightened out. So I would highly recommend that we continue this contract for an additional year. increase the obligation by just under $4,000 to get the extra hour through the winter, which she would probably end up applying to the summer months anyway. I don't know if anybody has any questions, if anybody's familiar with Susie or...
So those hours are banked is what you're saying?
I'm sorry?
Those hours are banked?
Yes.
I just have one question, and you made a comment that staff's pleased and we haven't heard anything. Have we ever reached out to the community for surveys, whatever, on where it's being serviced? Because again, the document we saw last time was somewhat generic, and I can appreciate she's involved in one thing, but it sounds like there hasn't been a lot. So, I mean, has there been feedback from the community? Because no news doesn't necessarily mean good news.
I've actually had discussions with downtown monument business owners in regards to it, and they were very skeptical of outsourcing the code enforcement. After they started working with her, they felt it was good.
As far as individual residents, what we usually would hear would be complaints and them calling in. And unfortunately, Tom's not here tonight. I don't know that, Steve, you have any statistics on this. But we've had residents call in to complain, which were then forwarded to Susie Ellis for code enforcement, and those have been resolved. So, in answer to your question, no, we've never done a survey. Are you happy? What's going on? Again, squeaky wheel gets the oil, so to me, no news is good news. If we don't have this massive amount of code enforcement complaints coming in that aren't being addressed. So.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make a motion for Resolution 21-218, authorizing the town manager to sign a contract for code enforcement services.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan.
Trustee Clark?
No.
Trustee Bornstein?
No.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
The motion fails in a lack of majority.
Just so you understand, you don't have code enforcement right now.
Yes. Resolution number 22-2018, a resolution accepting the 2017 audit. Ms. Smith.
At the last meeting, Kyle was here at the special meeting on July 30th. Kyle Logan of Logan and Associates was here to present the audit. There were some questions, and I think that he offered to answer those questions. I also offered to answer any questions that anyone had. I think there was questions on the conduit debt that we got settled, and I don't know of anything else outstanding right now. And so we did get the extension from the state, so we weren't in arrears for not filing by July 31st. But it still does have to be passed, and so I'm bringing it back to the board to see if you have other questions or concerns, or you want to go ahead and pass the audit.
Ma'am, what does the extension mean? I mean, is that a window to get whatever resolved? Is there a time? How does that work, please?
It is a 60-day extension to get the audit in. If you do not have the audit registered with the state auditor's office and DOLA and CML and all the other organizations, they will withhold taxes, sales and property. The audit itself won't change. It's an independent audit, so Kyle isn't going to change anything that he put in this audit. But he can certainly answer questions, or I can forward questions, or I can answer questions if you have questions about anything that's in the audit. So the 60-day window is to clear up any confusion or questions that anybody has and not be penalized by the state for it. And that's the first time we've had an extension on an audit, so they granted it rather quickly, so.
Thank you.
Any questions in regard to the audit? Okay, do we have a motion to, or a motion to accept the resolution for the audit? Okay, I'll motion to accept the 2017 audit. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
I will abstain.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Bornstein?
I'm gonna abstain too, please.
Trustee Cook?
No.
I would like to know, if you don't mind, what questions, or if you're directly communicating with Kyle, what questions you have, so we can get this cleared up in file. So,
I'd be happy.
I mean, not the second, but.
Okay. No, I think there was a lot of emails, and I'm trying to catch up and reading what's going on. I'm just being I'm maybe a little bit behind.
I mean, I'll continue to bring it back basically
that's
every
all.
meeting until you all have
that's
questions.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay, moving on to our next motion, or item number 10. Motion to ratify the lender recommendations for 2018 debt. Ms. Smith.
In January of this year, the VIN board passed a project to be completed, awarding a contract to Velocity Constructors for Well 4 and 5 treatment plant project. The amount of this contract is $924,436. In your budget, also to be financed under the CIP portion of the budget, is the booster station upgrade, which is the booster station that sits right outside this building that pushes the water up to the existing tank. And that needs some upgrades to it. So those two projects together come to 1.8 million. At the, sorry, I don't have my dates right in front of me. At a June board meeting, let's see, that's the other one. Mr. Tharnish did give everyone a copy of what the Well 4 and 5 treatment plant was and the booster station upgrade project. So that's been disseminated to the board. Resolution 18/2018 authorizes the town to participate in future issuance of tax exempt obligations to reimburse itself for capital projects. One of the things you approved tonight under checks over 5 was a rather large check for $260,000 to Velocity. That makes what we've paid them to date close to $500,000 out of cash. And that's why we're looking to finance this amount and then pay ourselves back, so we don't end up in a cash crunch like we have in years past. We're using Jim Manier, who is Hilltop Securities, and we use Thomas Peltz from Kutak Rock, who is bond counsel, issuing a loan or limited obligation bond. Runs a lot. It left. But I noticed, like on the Wagons West, they're predicting 4.25 to 5% cost of debt, and their issuance is about 10% of the debt. And we have 3 proposals that came in. I sent out, I believe, 6. 3 came in. Wells Fargo came back with just a 10-year proposal, not a 15, because it would save more money. KeyBank came back with a 15-year proposal, and Colorado National Bank and Trust came back with a 15-year proposal. After getting the 10-year proposal from Wells and looking at what that would cost us over 10 instead of 15 years, we went back and asked both KeyBank and Colorado National to give us another 10-year proposal, which KeyBank did, the other bank didn't. Talking with Mr. Manier and talking with Tom Peltz, both, some of the conditions that are involved in this, they preferred KeyBank. And what I'm asking you tonight is not to approve a loan, but to designate a lender. Because to do all of the paperwork with the bond attorney and the financial advisor, and then the bank's bond attorney, and they're their own financial advisor, takes quite a bit of time. So trying to get this through and get all the paperwork to you in advance to look at is going to take a couple of weeks. So the proposal is to ask you to make a motion to ratify the lender recommendation, which the professionals have recommended Key Bank as the person to issue this debt of $1.8 million, repayable in 10 years instead of 15. One of the other things that does is with our water capital plan, we're going to be looking at issuing more debt for the water fund to do these other capital projects. And so if you only have a 10-year debt issuance instead of 15, it frees up your capacity quicker. I had sent you all earlier last week all of the information we had from the 3 different banks, and the financial impact of amount financed on 10-year debt is $1.8 million principal and $348,000 in interest. Interest rate would be 3.4% issued with Key. Debt service payments would run about $215,000, which is an approved amounts of budget for the capital improvement project fund for our water enterprise fund, which we won't have any payments in 2018, but it would be factored into the 2019 budget forward. If we don't pass debt, which you've already actually passed the resolution saying we're going to issue debt, but if this, we can't ratify a lender that keeps pushing it out, and we need to get the cash back in to our operations, obviously, to make the water fund whole. So my request is that you ratify a lender recommendation for the 2018 Water Enterprise Fund debt, which was previously approved on Resolution 3/2018 and 18/2018. So I'm open to questions.
So you're looking to ratify one of the specific, you need a motion that ratifies one of those.
A specific lender. And then at the next board meeting, we would bring back the ordinance that was written by bond counsel and all of the detail and all of the finance documents, and everything would be presented at that time for your approval or disapproval.
So just a question, again, 3 banks, one bank comes with their cost analysis to save the town money based on the 10-year. The other 2 banks do not. And we go back to the other 2 banks, and all of a sudden the light comes on, and they come with 10. So what is the value on Key Bank that, because that's a little bit of a flag. It's a little bit of a flag. So I'd really like to understand that.
The value on Key, and I did not print it out, Mr. Manier and I had a conference call with all of the bankers and Tom Peltz, and some of the provisions that Key was providing was more attractive than Wells. The payoff provision, the early payoff provisions, and things of that nature. Okay, thank you. Key's offering flexible prepayment options, while Wells expecting a make-whole provision to kick in if we prepay the loan, meaning we'd have to pay more to prepay it if we chose to prepay it. The prepayment flexibility makes Key's proposal more attractive in business terms, and that's a quote from Mr. Manier. They did have some issues with Wells, with another lender, when interest rates went up and Wells it didn't lock a rate and raise the interest rate on a provider, on a municipality. So there was a little bit of sourness on Wells on that one.
Is it normal protocol to go back to year 3, bid? Because I know again with Mr. Varnish and other things, you bid and that's it. You don't get a chance to review your competition and start manipulating them.
Because we haven't locked anything in And this is just a proposal to talk to a lender, or to pick a lender. We still have the 15-year proposals in the packet. You could vote on those as well. I mean, that's the information that's in here as well. It would cost, yeah, I had it somewhere, sorry. The difference, gotta find the sheet. Sorry. The interest difference between 15 years and 10 years, for Key Bank, it's like, for 15 years would be $554,000, and for 10 years would be $348,000. So it's a substantial savings on interest.
Right, yeah, definitely. I'm not challenging the homeowner, I'm challenging the bank. If they're in our best interest, why all of a sudden they should have.
Because we didn't ask for 10 starting out, because we said 15, we thought it would be an easier.
So we specified that in the 15.
We specified the 15 in our RFP, which I sent to you all. It asked for, the first ask was 15 years. And then in looking at that, and then looking at what the return on 10 would be, and the savings on interest would be, it's like that's something, one, it's doable, and two, it would save quite a bit of interest. That's why we went back for the 10.
Okay, thank you.
Can you, I guess, walk me through the process? I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I understand, financing long term to save on cash flow and maximize that. So we budgeted specifically some of these projects for this year. How did we budget that? Did we budget that with, cash?
I don't have my budget with me, I'm sorry. The capital project fund that we started in this 2018 budget that we hadn't used in previous years, where we put all the capital in one fund, funded it by sales tax. It does show CIP, other financing of water, and it shows other grants available, and then tax revenues. So CIP, other financing, in the budget, we're showing about 1.6 million financing, and then we had hoped for some grants that didn't come in. And then as far as payments, right now, well, 4 and 5, we've paid $434,000 to date, and that's really the only thing we've done out of this capital improvement project.
And that was to Velocity for the,
yes.
Out of the, about $500,000 out of the $900,000 project?
Mm-hmm. In the capital budget, under the budget section, under the capital program, we've got budgeted out of cash and financing, and then unbudgeted. So this is budgeted out of cash and financing, because we're showing revenues in that budget, and I can shoot you a copy of that page. We're showing revenues in that budget of financing the 1.8 million and sales tax to cover these projects. And then we're showing unfinanced, unbudgeted cost over on the right-hand side, which, again, I can shoot you a copy of that. It's clearer to look at.
Right, so to clarify, if we do not, we've already started on some of the projects. We have not started based on the most recent financials. It looks on many of the projects, and I have a follow-up question to that. So the projects that we have started, essentially Wells 4 and 5, that $900,000 upgrade project, we do or we do not have the cash to pay for that.
We do not.
Inclusive of the 2A fund.
This is not 2A money. This is existing water, it's not new water.
Inclusive of the sales tax for the water system improvements.
Inclusive of that, it would strip the cash down out of the water fund.
So it is not there.
It is not there.
And will not be there.
Well, we will pay it because the board approved the contract in January to do the project.
Where I'm going with that is where will the money come from to pay Velocity when the project is complete?
If
like
it is
right
not,
now we just wrote on
yeah, if it is not financed, the money will come out of cash from the water fund.
Okay.
And if the water fund doesn't have it, then it'll come out of the general fund as a loan to the water fund.
Okay.
And this was when Mr. Logan was talking about our cash position being much better this year. That would pretty much wipe it out.
Right. So going backwards to the list of projects that we had hoped for with this year's budget being August What is the reality of knocking out that list of projects, since the 1.8 million loan that we're talking about is inclusive of all those projects?
That 1.8 million loan is actually inclusive of the two projects, the booster station and well 4 and 5. Sorry, way too much paper. In the capital projects fund, we have well 4 and 5, Raspberry Lane chlorine stations, Raspberry Lane distribution line, water treatment plant 7 change, well 4 and 5 building rehab, booster station upgrade, solar lights, Limbaugh Park, water fountain park, splash park, turf tractor, beacon light sidewalk, pour and play tot lot, and general fund capital leases, which we didn't go into a capital lease in 2018, so we have that savings in there. So all of those projects, you can see we're working on the beacon light sidewalk, which that's a general fund project, not a water fund, not just to keep it confused. But for water specifically, we had the booster station, well 4 and 5 building rehab after the upgrade, which is another $150,000. Well 7, which is not the well 7 money we spent on an emergency basis. This is for changing out the valves, is that right?
Pump and motor.
Pump and motor at well 7. Raspberry Lane, pardon me, the chlorine and distribution line there was about 100,000. That's probably not going to get done this year. Again, because you're pushing the end of summer, it's not likely that any of these larger projects would get done. None of the park projects will probably be done. They're working on the sidewalk, I know, and the rest of it's water.
But the 1.8 million
is just those two
will get done this year?
Yes.
Okay, that was going to be the question, is if we budgeted borrowing 1.6 million, so that was an expected long-term financing plan when we crafted or approved the budget from last year, with the expectation that those projects would be completed this year. If they did not, or if they do not, then what do you do? If
the projects
if you borrow the money for this year, it's a budgeted item for this year, where do you put it?
If you go back and look at the resolution that was passed, again, sorry about all the paper. Resolution 18 that we passed, it gives us ending or prior to the latter of 18 months of the date of the expenditures or placing service of the projects. So from the time the project is finished, we have 18 months to reimburse ourselves. And that would end up on your balance sheet, again, as a loan payable and a liability payable. So.
Any further questions from the board? Seeing none, do we have a motion to ratify a lender?
I'm not sure how this should be worded, but I'm going to give it a go. I'd like to make a motion to ratify the lender recommendation for Key Bank for 2018 debt.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Ms. Hogan, we have a motion, a second.
Trustee Koopman?
Yes.
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes. That motion passes 5-1.
And we will be back at the next meeting with the actual documents, and the lender will be here, and all the who's will be here to answer your questions. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is public comments. Public comments for items not on the agenda. Permissible code 2.04.030 J2B. Public comments shall be limited to 3 minutes. Does anybody have any public comments? Ms. Heisel.
They were laughing.
I don't know how to say this because it's somewhat of an item on the agenda. I guess I'm just trying to understand, maybe there's a logical reason why we didn't approve having our code enforcer. Seems like it's been a trend and habit of not approving anyone to be reelected that needed to be reelected. And if there's a reason for it, that's fine, but it's not given to the public ever. You guys, the ones that vote no, don't ever say why. You don't okay the individuals that were already there. Maybe there's a good reason for it, but you don't ever give it to us. There's rumors that fly about, but there's never ever anything from the words from your mouths that say why you don't. Kind of disturbs me that we don't have a code enforcer now. And what's the plan? I mean, because that, I don't know, does that go behind finding a town manager and then a town treasurer and then a town attorney and whatever else? So is that 6 months down the road that we get a code enforcer? Or does that get moved up in front of the town manager as the number one thing? What's the priority now? Because I don't get it. It's a code enforcer. If she was doing horrible, I think we would have known it by now. I would think so because we would have had a lot of complaints. So I'm a little disturbed by that. Not sure what the deal is with the audit thing, why that can't be approved at this point. Maybe you have some legitimate questions. I'm assuming the special meeting was about the audit. Is that correct?
The special meeting was actually called to talk about how to go forward with the hiring of key personnel.
Oh, I thought it said something about the
But the
financial
audit
too.
was the first item on there
Right.
because of the date, because it was at the end of the.
And I couldn't make it to that, but I don't know what the 60-day time limit. I don't know when that started, so I don't know how many days we have left on that. So are we going to miss that deadline, and then we're not going to get our taxes that we need to fund and make payroll for our staff, for our policemen? Like, come on, guys. If you legitimately have questions, fine, but do it in a timely manner so we can move this stuff along. You were elected to do that. I'm sorry, I know it takes time. I know I'm complaining about it because I'm a citizen. I have never run. You're probably like, well, why don't you run then if you're going to complain about it? I don't run because I don't have the time to do it, and I'm admitting that. But if you're going to run and you're going to be up there, find the time to look at everything before the meeting and be prepared and know what's going on. It's fine to have some questions, but to ask every detail at the meeting when you had the packet for probably, I don't know when she gives it. I don't know when you guys get your packets, but I know it's ahead of time. And it's not the same day. It's got to be at least 3 days to a week. It's not right. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you got it today, and that's why you don't have time to do all that. But I feel like everything's stalling. Everything that comes up, everything, it takes forever.
Thank you, Faisal. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll move on. Board authorizations. Cancellation of our regular meeting on November 5th. El Paso County will be using our boardroom for the election. Ms. Hogan?
Just as simple as that.
Okay.
We need to find either a different venue. If you want to have the meeting, I already reached out to the chamber. They are booked that night. That not meaning that we can't find one. Big Red is usually very accommodating. So just an idea. I know you've had a lot of special meetings this month. I know that there'll be some budget workshops put in place because that's right around budget time. So that's just, I'm just throwing that out as an option.
Is the board okay with canceling the November 5th meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Consider that canceled. Terry Hayes is gone. Oh, did you want to discuss what you're wanting to discuss?
It's just my annual, what the heck do we do? kind of thing. I just put together a short little presentation, and it's especially good for our 2 new trustees. I know the rest of you have sat through it before, but we always add a few new things. So it's really just an overview of what the Chamber, the Economic Development Corporation, and the Visitor Center does.
Do we have an planned date or?
Well, I believe Ms. Hayes is available on the 20th, which would be our next regular meeting, August 20th. That works?
How about September?
That's fine.
Busy enough, we got a lot going on.
What's our agenda look like
With
for
the town manager, I'm just looking, not knowing what next week's gonna bring. I anticipate that we're gonna have some follow-up meetings and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'd be in favor of it, absolutely, but
Mhm.
September would probably be most ideal.
Is the board in agreements with September?
Mhm.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Safety of the median. Ms. Corley, you just need direction on that?
Yes, I don't know, does the board want to try to adopt an ordinance that addresses median safety, or what we want to do from here?
Can you put together what the ordinance would look like and bring it before us?
For safety?
Possibly a draft one. I know Colorado Springs recently did one on safety in the median, so that might be worthy of reaching out to them to see.
Yes, they did 4 feet, and then, but they also had a stipulation in there that pertained to the speed on a roadway. So
that wouldn't include the median going into someone else's establishment.
No, it just talks about the, I think the speed was 30 miles per hour. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was the fact that it was high speed, and then the size of a median, not having 4 feet of access being a public safety issue for anyone to stand there, not just panhandlers. And I don't know if there are any other medians in the town that we would need to look at.
I think it'd be great to have a safety.
Is the board in agreements with her bringing something in the form of an ordinance before us?
Okay.
Okay.
A couple more that I would like to see in the future, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Defining zoning uses. I think it's a long overdue conversation that we have been recommended by our planning department many times. And I think it's something that we need to finally focus on getting on the books to talk about and address. So I don't know if you want to do a discussion on that. I'd hate to say another workshop, but we need to do something to address that and then move forward as far as getting our code updated.
I agree.
Could.
So the direction would be to set a time to talk about it. So we're going to need the planning department. I would imagine someone specific to land use zoning as far as a legal perspective.
Could we just direct the planning department to come up with their definitions for us to review?
A proposed update? I think that'd be great.
That's a good idea.
Do you have the time to put together a proposed update?
For zoning definitions.
We are currently looking for matching funds in our own budget to get a grant for next year, and that would be submitted later this year and be available next year. We don't see that our budget could afford outside consultant doing an overhaul without that kind of grant money. Not receiving the grant, we would come up with an alternative of what would be our most important focus with regard to updating the ordinance and use that money the best we could to do that.
I think that makes perfect sense. So the direction would be, as we enter this year's budget cycle for next year, to direct funds specifically for an update for the land use codes and definitions.
Okay. Is the board in agreements with that?
Yes.
Addressing code enforcement, it's something we need to talk about and get resolved. There's obviously different options. I was here when we hired an outside firm with the concept of reducing costs, which we did. However, my concern is that it's not enough coverage, and when you look at the amount that we're paying for that on an hourly basis at nearly $80+ per hour, it would seem that we could find an interested local in-house individual, even on a part-time basis, in the $20 to $30 range, that would still save costs from that higher amount, or that $21,000 amount, but provide equal, if not more, coverage. So that would be my interest in seeing what that would look like. Yeah, maybe we have a part-time employee who would be a good fit that'd be interested in going to a full-time employee. But I do know that a $20 to $30 employee with benefits and payroll liabilities, is still going to be less than $80 per hour.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The difference would be that you're paying them 20,000 or $80, whatever an hour, which I'm sure you're right on that. I haven't looked at it.
It's about $83 an hour.
But we tried in the past to get a part-time code enforcement because it's not considered full-time through the winter because there's just not much for them to do. We only have one part-time employee, which is the man that cleans the building. And everyone else is a full-time employee right now. We can look and put out for a part-time employee.
I think it'd be a
probably
great first
suggest
step.
you do that more toward early spring or.
Well, that's the other
just,
concern. I mean,
you
there's
know,
still
it's just
many codes that have to do
timing.
with other things other than weeds. So I mean,
Weeds tend to be the majority of it.
based
It's
on
summer.
the cases that we saw in the report, it seems to be the popular findings.
The weeds, and then it's usually automobiles, like old automobiles, or somebody's
RVs,
got something sitting on
campers.
their property that offends somebody else, and that type of thing.
I'd be interested to at least see what kind of response we get. And like I said,
We
or
can
like Ms.
float it,
Heisel shared,
yeah.
I think you know, we need to not just sit on it, so we need to do something about it.
Ms. Smith, could we possibly consider maybe a month-to-month with the current person that's doing the code enforcement for us?
Rather than
As we look for,
We can ask her.
so that we don't, so we're not without
Yeah.
one?
I think we're coming up on the winter where we don't need one anyway.
I mean, we could ask if she can, well, I don't know, you didn't approve her contract, but I guess if the board made a motion to just
Approve
pay
the
her
contract.
whatever hours she works,
Month to month?
that would be okay? If she's willing to do that.
I
But
don't
she's
wanna do
pretty
that.
agreeable, but,
can
we
ask
need
her.
to stay with one thing, because now it's
So
getting.
going back to authorization item, I'd like to either have a discussion item at an upcoming meeting so we can hash this out a little bit further and or put a job posting in place for part-time, to at least see what kind of response we get.
I mean, there's nothing that says we have to post, we have to hire if we post.
Right.
Right? Just, so, you know, with the board's approval, we could put an ad in for part-time code enforcement.
I think it'd be a minimal expense to see what kind of options are
$20 an
there.
hour range and see.
Possibly for someone local in Monument.
And when you say part-time, are you thinking, you know, literally like 1,040 hours, which would get you through the summer and the spring, or?
I mean, we can look at that. I mean, 20 to 30 hours. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's something we're gonna need to hash out. The reality is, we're paying, you know, a part-time salary for 240 hours a year of work, and that's scary.
We are saving though, because we're not paying benefits and retirement and all of that stuff that jacks up the cost of an employee.
If you did hire a part-time person, part-time people, unless they're working 32 hours a week, are not eligible for benefits. Or some of the benefits, like vacation accrual and stuff, they'd be eligible for a reduced percentage of those if they're 32 to 40.
Okay.
So if you do find a part-time person, you don't have to pay them benefits.
Right.
What's the
We
payroll
haven't had a lot of
burden
success
for?
with it, but we could try. I'm sorry.
What's the typical payroll burden for a town employee in that type of capacity?
The benefits range depending on who takes what, because some people don't take any insurance, some take family insurance and that kind of thing. It's 25 to 48% of the annual salary is benefits. Well, I mean, there's a salary and then 28% on top of that, or 40% on top, or it varies. It's something that's usually in the budget document that you'll get to review. But it has run over the years solidly 28%, and then sometimes it's higher and sometimes it's a little bit lower for those people that don't take a lot of benefits. And
yeah.
Subordinate.
I'm sorry, it's a good benefit package. It's just
Subordinate agreements on this?
To just wait, and discuss it at another meeting?
To look into posting a position Is that what?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'd like to see is the posting of the position, see what kind of candidates we get. If it's, I mean, if there's no one that applies and no one that's qualified. But I mean, that's something where we'd have to craft up a job description, we'd have to craft up all that fun stuff.
How many hours?
Hours, kind of range.
Yes,
So there should be a discussion item.
It should be a discussion item.
So
Can we do some legwork as far as what something like that would typically get paid? I mean, what do other towns do? Surely.
The last time we had a code enforcement officer full-time, they were at 42,000.
I don't think we need that. I mean, clearly,
So
but I don't think we
part-time, I
need
would think in that $20
is
an hour
minimal
range,
coverage.
we should be able to find someone.
I mean, 2 day a month coverage is. You got a long time to wait and we just complaints.
Is the board in agreements with this is a discussion item?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's simply a discussion item.
Yes. Even though we've discussed it. Any other board authorizations?
Do you want this brought back at the next meeting, this discussion item?
Yeah, I think that was.
We need to
Yeah,
move,
I think
need to move
timeliness
forward
is-
on this.
Yes.
Yes. Any other board authorizations?
Now, Trustee Elliott, if you wanted to say something about the month-to-month. That was the other thing that was on the table that nobody.
To see if she was willing to do that.
If she's willing to do that, yeah.
Will you also pursue that? Is the board in agreements with
Well, that's
pursuing the month?
question.
Doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah.
I'd like,
Yes.
do we have options?
I should ask her then.
Yes,
I see some
exactly.
nods and I see at least 4 nods, so.
Yes.
Board of Trustee comments. Trustee Clark, do you have any board comments? Trustee Stevens?
No.
Trustee Kelly? Trustee Goodman?
Not tonight.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. Ms. Corley, will you take us into executive session?
I recommend a motion for an executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 246402-4A to discuss the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real personal or other property interest.
Do we have a motion? I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes. We'll take a 5-minute recess and reconvene here.